Meteorologist Casey Cloud live with you here on this Thursday evening, afternoon, evening, whatever you want to call it, a little after 5 o'clock. We have some weak rotation here that I'm watching here just north of Starke right now. No warning right now, special weather statement, but we already had a couple tornado warnings earlier. I just want to be on guard here because this is not something we've really been talking about, at a header today, but we've had a couple storms with the rotation today down toward one Flagler County, the other more so in Putnam County, even some wind damage, at the minimum if it wasn't tornado damage down there in Putnam County. So we have a boundary here, and this is stuff that, can kind of develop here pretty quickly. I know that latest scan slightly weaker on the rotation than what it was, and we do have a little bit of interference here, but the other radar though out of Moody is showing some of this rotation aloft as well. It's not very tight, but it's just, we're in a spot here. Sometimes over the years we've had these little, spins that end up being, even stronger looking than this certain radar, and then it's a situation if it's a thunderstorm warning, but maybe not a tornado warning, and then something happens, tornadic, that ends up causing some problems here. So this may not even, produce anything, may not get any warning, but we're right here in Bradford, not far away. I know folks in Starke, just want to try to give you the heads up. I know, I'm in the eastern part of Bradford County, just east of Starke, and I know the folks in Starke, you guys want to heads up here, north side of town, in case something were to happen, just north of town, right there, near the bypass, per se, and this is right during, the rush hour period, too. So let me go ahead and pull up our camera here. We don't have any traffic cameras, unfortunately. That'd be really helpful in this situation. You see some of the darker skies. We're looking more west than northwest here, but as you're kind of looking at things, we're just going to monitor the situation. Right now, you don't necessarily need to take any action unless you hear some type of roaring noise. I mean, other than just be inside, really, if you can, because there's some lightning around. But we don't have any type of formal warning here on play at this moment. So that's good, and it is not tight enough to prompt that. This is something generally I wouldn't jump in for because, it's not really crazy looking here by any means. But these storms today, already had two of them. They were a little more discreet than this, have a tendency to rotate and give us problems. I know we have another storm here just on the northern side of Camp Landing. Now here, again, this is where we have some rotation. It's relatively weak, and it's a little displaced here. So I'm not overly, just extremely concerned, but there's just enough for me to jump in because I don't want you guys to get caught off guard. And as with the other two storms, it seems to be wanting to jump a little bit further south from where they put an advisory. There's an advisory here for gusts around 40 and pea-sized hail. I just want to be very careful with this. Again, there's nothing you need to take in terms of the accident unless we get a tornado warning, so a thunderstorm warning, other than just be inside, right? Because there is lightning around whenever thunder roars go indoors. This is fairly weak, again, weaker than what I normally come on for in terms of rotation. But it's, coming and may start to jump closer to where we're at, actually, because it seems to be trailing further to the south. So I said just north of Starke, we've been watching it. It may come right more in towards Starke here and toward, areas, not too far from where we're at here. Not far from the Gotham Country Club if this keeps trailing south here. Let me go to rotation tracker because I don't want to mislead you guys here because it's just, I know we have the rotational parameters too up on the other system. So, I said this north of Starke, which is true right now, but it's starting to kind of push off further south. You see, this is one area of rotation we're watching, but then this one here is north of Starke, but it seems to be wanting to trail down in towards Starke there, maybe closer to the fairgrounds, give or take, if this trend continues. Again, there's no formal warning here, like what we had earlier on. There's a decent chance we don't get one. We have an instability. We have some rotational parameters. And then, we've had that boundary. I know a situation where you have wind switching directions. We just got to be kind of careful here because something could kind of jump up on us with little or no advance warning. That's tightening just a little bit here. I just want to make sure we're giving you guys the heads up. And again, this could come into Starke. I know it's north of Starke right now, per se. I know with, but this is trailing more down toward town now. We need to be careful with this. I'm going to go ahead. I'm tightening up a bit. This is coming more, toward areas. So you see, I know with the roadway, this is coming a little bit south of where the bypass kind of cuts off. So as you're looking, as you're tracking things, that's tightening up some. this with the history on these today. We got to be really careful here around Starke. We got to be really careful. I know I'm switching between modes here on the system. We're looking at our camera. I'm going to check some things here behind the scenes. You know, I can actually see the cloud trucks a little bit better just above this, but you know, you can kind of see a little bit as well. I'm going to put something on my screen real quick. I don't see enough to like do a different kind of mode here. There's a certain mode I can just switch to if I have to go a little bit further up, but it wouldn't necessarily look as good. But you can start to see it now on your view as well. The darker clouds here, at least. We just gotta be kind of careful because this is something that, you know, we don't generally get very much. That hook is becoming more well defined here. We need to, you know, you're not needing to be in shelter, your tornado safe spot yet. But when I'm going to pull up, we do not currently have a tornado warning for Bradford here. That may change momentarily if the trends continue. But let me go ahead and see what tornado safety tips look like. This, if we were to get a tornado warning, you'll need to be inside, you know, really away from windows and being in that closet or bathroom or something. You know, just get as many walls between you and the outside as possible. Have that football, bicycle helmet, baseball helmet ready there. You know, just be really, you know, ready here and have those shoes on just in case. I know I just don't particularly like the way this looks here because of what we just had with the other two storms earlier on. This wouldn't be a very strong tornado if it were to develop, but still a tornado that could have winds upward of 100. I know it sounds, you know, fairly, you know, strong, but it technically, you know, would be something that's lower end, but still cause big problems. So that's why we're giving you guys this heads up in case it does happen. So there's your hook right here. Again, there's no warning yet. I am giving you guys a preemptive alert for a potential warning. It may not happen. We may not get a warning, but I think it's imperative since we're right here in Starke. We have the most viewers here. I think it's, you know, after we already had earlier on, I think it's just in our best interest to be giving you guys this heads up. It's right at rush hour. People aren't really expecting this. It wasn't really something, you know, we were thinking ahead of today could happen, but now looking ahead, you know, in this pattern, if we get more, you know, isolated storms, if we don't get a bunch of rain, then we could have an issue here with these discrete storms in the days ahead here a little bit. You know, if we don't have as much of the coverage of the moisture, I think we would have more coverage, so we wouldn't have as big of this problem, you know, as we look ahead. But looking for debris, not really seeing anything. It's not really tight. That scan looks, well, a little bit looser, so that's good. It looks broader here, but let me check another mode here. Again, we don't have any warning, but this is not far away here. Again, there's no formal warning, but the Moody radar showing it. It's not. Sometimes you have like side lobe contamination, which, you know, is a false signature, but after we already had earlier on and from the Moody radar seeing this rotation, that's not what this is. It's just some spin here that we have to be alert, you know, for, that if it tightens, we could get a tornado warning here for the north side of Starke. It would probably include all of Starke just to be safe. But we don't have that yet. We may not end up getting that. We may not end up getting any damage from this, but we got to be prepared here as we're looking, as we're tracking things here on the Doppler perspective. Let's go back to our camera because it's going to start to maybe come into view a little bit better as we're looking, as we're tracking. Just looking at some dark clouds here again. Let me just check my wind gauge here behind me. 7 miles an hour, so wind's picking up a little bit. I know that's at like 6-7 feet up, but again, no formal warning. I'm trying to give you guys a preemptive warning, so you don't need to yet, unless you hear that rumble on freight train noise, take the tornado precautions. But if you hear that, then you got to get going immediately. You will have literally seconds of that. I mean, it may, you know, you may end up, you know, having that before we're to get a formal warning. That's happened around here before, so you just have to be careful. This is a very tricky situation. It's right on the edge of needing it right now. It's just under the criteria, I would say, but it's very close here. Again, we just need to be careful because I know our last two tornadoes around start 2020 and 2021, neither of those had a formal tornado warning until, you know, 21. It was already causing the damage there. 2020, we had, I think, the tornado possible tag on that Christmas Eve, and it was dropped before it was really coming in. I know we had COVID around. There's so much happening then. We had the severe thunderstorm warning on both. We don't have a warning on this yet. You know, I would kind of think maybe a severe thunderstorm warning or a tornado possible tag, but in a way, The winds don't quite meet that unless, we get a tightening, and then it goes right to tornado warning. Kind of like what we had in Flagler, the first tornado warning we had earlier on. So we need to be very careful here. We need to be vigilant, obviously, with this situation. We're at 82 degrees right now, so temperature dropping some. Let me go ahead and zoom back out a little bit. Let's look at some other storms here. Zoom in to Flagler, not much on that. Advisory for parts of southern Marion, gust to 40 possible. They're not really much rotation, at least from that viewpoint. Let me pull up this might not, it's kind of on the edge, but I know I'm zooming a lot here. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing anything. It's just a one-man band. This has that broad rotation here, broad rotation. It may not be enough to produce, but we're just trying to be on top of this as a precaution. Let me see if any of our viewers have seen anything here. Don't have any comments as of yet that I can see, but again, I'm going to continue to watch this. We're just coming on the air preemptively. There's not a warning yet. If we get one, we're not changing the description. You'll just see it. It'll have it in the corner, whether it's a severe thunderstorm warning or a tornado warning. It'll have a box giving you what you need to do. There's thunder outside, though. Where we're at here east of Starke. Let's look back at the camera again. I have a broader perspective behind the scenes I can look at. Just bear with me here. Seeing the trees both some as we're looking, as we're tracking things. I know this angle maybe I know it's mainly west here, but honestly, this is coming more, okay, this is tightening up a little bit, coming right here towards Starke. This is tricky, guys. I know it may be displaced. There's a decent chance that's the case. We could have some wind damage, so it's a tricky situation because it looks like it's just right under what needs a warning, but it's coming right into Starke. So that's why we're being extra vigilant here. We're in Bradford. This is not going to be far from maybe coming toward where we're at. So it's right on the edge of needing that warning, but not quite there. But that doesn't mean it still couldn't produce something very briefly here, whether it's wind damage or a very brief tornado. So we need to be very careful with this, guys. Around Starke here, again, this seems to be kind of angling. It's coming from the northwest to the southeast. It's going to be close to us here in just a moment. It may be headed almost right toward the Starke Golf and Country Club area. So we may need to, I may need to leave the studio here if this tightens up much more and get in my safe spot. Hopefully it doesn't work out that way, but it's not out of the question here. So just, if that were to happen, just be, understanding of what I'm doing here. But we're not in that situation yet. There's no formal warning. I'm checking the cameras. Let me check something else here real quick. I think, and I mean, I have it set quite right in here, but I kind of want to leave the camera up because things can change so rapidly. Okay, I know it's not set perfectly there, but we need to keep an eye on the clouds and just monitor this here as we're tracking, because if I'm looking at radar, I can only look at one at a time unless I'm assuming you want to look at the other. But the radar's going to be a little behind the clouds. That's our live view outside my window, literally. And we're watching to see if something does happen here. So, again, we're monitoring this very carefully here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the full shot on that. Bear with me. Bear with me here. Again, not seeing anything definitive from that, obviously, but we're just going to be ready here in case something does happen. And no formal warning. I'm giving you guys a preemptive warning here, just in case something were to happen. It's a little displaced, but it has that hook. It has that rotation. And it's coming right into Starke. It's probably around Starke in town right now. And it's headed top to the south and east. So maybe going from about the fairgrounds. Yes, I mean, I don't want to be really precise with this because, it may be a little bit displaced here with the pixels, but the fairgrounds and kind of maybe something here coming toward areas off toward the south and east of that. So again, we're looking at the different scans. Let me go from the radar further up here real quick as we continue to watch. We continue to track things here in toward the weather center. And let's go ahead and just keep looking at things. I know I got the camera up in the corner. Let me make that full again. It's looking kind of interesting. We're definitely seeing here those darker clouds on the camera view. Again, we're making sure we don't have some type of funnel or something, trying to give you a real-time look at things. And we're just east of Starke. So we're trying to monitor things very carefully. This is kind of headed our way if we're not careful here. So we just got to be careful for sure as we're looking, as we're tracking. Just trying to keep you updated. Let me go ahead, switch back over. The scan's a couple minutes old, so this is from 5 minutes ago. So by now the rotation's getting very close to the east side of town here, probably. This is live. That's getting dark there on the left side of that view. It looks like on some other modes, though, it's starting to dip a little bit south, more so even. So that is something that we have to watch. That's something we have to be very mindful of, for sure. Just going between some different modes here in the weather center. Again, I'm just trying to give a preemptive warning in case something, were to tighten just a tad bit. And a little bit of lightning with it, not a lot. So you wouldn't, sometimes in the summer months that are, maybe more in the way of July, early August, you would have a lot of lightning before you have a nasty storm. This is something a little bit different than that. That rotation looks a bit weaker now, and it's also dipping, a little bit south, and our camera kind of indicates some of the darker clouds on the left side, which is a little more southwest-ish versus northwest-ish. So I think it's dipping south of where we're at. Again, it's not even an advisory further south. We do have some very dark clouds, though, obviously, as we're tracking things, trying to give you guys the very latest weather information, obviously, trying to keep you guys up to date. Yeah, so we have the velocity from 523. It's very broad right now, which is what we want to see. We don't want to have tight. We want to have broad here, which would be, less concerning. But that hook is, more concise, and it's further west, which I think it starts to really indicate the displacement with this. I mean, meaning it's probably a little less likely this rotation is getting down toward the surface, even if that hook is relatively powerful looking on reflectivity. And I got to wonder if years ago, after we already had what we had earlier on, if years ago we didn't have velocity, like that was the case, decades ago. We've had a velocity for a while, debris tracker, maybe, 10 to 15 years, give or take. I may not be quite right on that, but my point is, we've had velocity a little longer, and it says the wind's in the directions, because if it wasn't for that sounding a little weaker, that right there says there's a problem, with that hook. If you're looking at a radar, that hook says there's a concern, but the wind mode says, well, it's a little bit more muddy. We're not sure, that it's, and it's not as tight as I was looking here. Maybe a little inflow on that, by the way, on the correlation coefficient. But we're not necessarily seeing any type of tornado debris or anything that I'm noting at this point in time. I'll back it up a little bit. You can kind of see here that what we're tracking. I know we're going to go back a little bit. If we don't see it tighten up soon, and we'll probably wrap it up since it's not a formal warning, as I continue to reiterate. As we were watching the northeast start, now it's kind of come across dark, and now it keeps shifting further south away from even where the advisory was, and it's out of that box now. The advisory box, not a warning, but an advisory, something just below a warning here. As we're looking now, it's just kind of shifting further and further south. These storms, all of these have done that today. All three of them have kept, kind of shifting on us here. Further south of where we would have maybe thought they would go based on where the direction was at first, and they're probably gone. I think it's filling certain, atmospheric platers, that boundary here, and they kind of turn here on us a little bit further down toward the south, which is interesting. I know this definitely looks more displaced than it did as we're looking here between that hook and the rotation, which would indicate not as big of a concern. Let's go to the Melbourne radar. It looks very weak from that. As we're looking from the Moody radar, that looks weaker as well from that. Because you saw from the Moody radar for a couple frames there, it was kind of tight. I know I kind of clicked off on that a little bit. For a couple frames there, it was getting kind of tight. But now it looks like it's really broadened, which is great news from that vantage point at least. So with that all being said, I think I'll give it 1 or 2 more frames. And if that continues to be the case, then we'll kind of move away from having to focus on that too much here. which is good news. So let me go ahead and switch back over here as we're looking, as we're tracking things. I know, trying to give you guys the latest. Let me pull the camera back up. Let me go ahead and pull the camera back up just for a second here as we give you guys the very latest. Let me go ahead and continue to track some things here. I'm going to check to make sure we're not getting any reports of anything on any of our other sources here. Just bear with me. Want to make sure we're giving you guys the very latest on what's going on. Let me see if there's any type of, I know we had some of that flooding back on Saturday. This is not something that would really cause flooding by the end of the weekend. We might have issues, but that's, you know, because of the moisture coming in, more coverage of it. When you have more coverage of it, that would probably decrease your rotational threat here as we're looking, as we're tracking things. I'm not seeing any reports of anything that I can tell so far. Checking a couple more sources. Sometimes it may take a few minutes for things to update. Let me check Paradise's maps here. I know in the state we have over 6,600 customers in the dark, including over 2,700 in Putnam County, which is kind of concerning after what we had earlier on. You know, it's something that wasn't showing up when we were live earlier on, but now it may be showing up. Maybe an indication of something that happened down toward Putnam County earlier on. You know, in terms of maybe some, you know, we had reported some damage earlier on, but we didn't actually have the power outage showing up. Power outages showing up, but they're showing up from Clay Electric now. So let me just go ahead and keep checking things. Yeah, the reports out of Putnam. We had a couple, in fact. Multiple trees and power lines were down near Karen Lane and Florida 19 Southwest of Palaca around 3:17 and at 3:20. Putnam County Sheriff reported trees and power lines blown down along Silver Lake Drive. So, you know, a situation here where we have to be very vigilant, obviously. You know, that's why we were kind of being a little overprotective. Hopefully it'll be how you can call this after the fact for Bradford. After that, you know, was something that was evolving down toward Putnam. It had some similarities. Maybe this, I would say, was something that ended up being a little weaker on the radar, but it was still something that wasn't that much different. As we watch now, this continues to trail south compared to what you would have expected based on how things were drawn up earlier. It's out of the advisory polygon even. So that's something that we're monitoring now. This is headed more off towards State Road 100 as we're looking, as we're tracking things. So again, just continuing to give you guys the very latest. That rotation looks to be just a little bit more, you know, ramping up a bit on that latest scan, but it's also moving into less populated areas soon. Not yet, but soon, as it gets into Clay County there. It's fairly rural for a little bit out there. That looks like starting to get a little bit of green and red there, but it's a little bit displaced still as we're looking, as we're tracking things. So let me go ahead, see where we are with this, as we try to give you guys the latest updates. Let me go ahead and I'm going to get model guidance up in a sec. I'm just going to see if there's any reports on any different platforms. Again, with no formal warning on this. We're jumping in. We've been jumping on preemptively for this because of that rotation, just to be on the safe side after we already had the damage in Putnam County earlier on. We thought, you know, we don't want to just sit back here and then find out in an hour. Well, you know, we had something, and it's too late to warn people by then, obviously. So again, we're just continuing to give you guys the very latest here, trying to keep you up to date, trying to keep you informed. Let me go ahead and just keep looking here at things. I know we're starting to have the rain pick up where we're at, but the rotation now is dipping south. It keeps trailing south of where you would think. And this is now out there further off, just east of 100. But again, it's a little displaced. And so probably, let's just say right across 100 right now, here close to where that other tornado hit in 2020 at this point. So let me go ahead and see where else we have, you know, what else we have in terms of some information. Where else we're going to go? We're going to go to a camera here and see some of that rain now here east of Starke. This isn't going to produce us a whole bunch of rain, I don't think. pretty heavy for a few minutes. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like what we had on Saturday in terms of that rainfall. But you definitely see some of that, precip coming on down. Let me go ahead and you see all these storms by themselves. Let me go ahead and jump on over here. You see some of our rotational parameters. As I'm jumping between things here, I'm going to take the lightning off. Let's take temperatures off for a minute. Let me go ahead. I'm going to pull up some model guidance here. So this is supposed to be 7 o'clock. But let me work it back, we're going to work it back a little here. Let's just go back. Let's just take it back. 5 o'clock is a little bit off of where our storms actually are right now. But at least the idea. I'm going to zoom out a little because I know we have folks watching maybe possibly around Orlando, Tampa for that USF game. I don't see any concern right now necessarily. It should be getting going about now, but USCF, there's some storms in that area. We'll have to see if there's some issues for that football game tonight. College football kicking on off. But 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7, 8. Let me zoom out more here. We're going to go. This is 8 o'clock, 9, 10 o'clock, 11, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 a.m., 3, 4, 5, 6. You see moisture lingering. I just hope none of that's rotating on us, or we'll have to jump back in. But you see here as we get into tomorrow, it's showing now some clearing into the early afternoon, but then you have more storms developing, and it's trying to sound more isolated. The higher res models show that more than those broader scale models. So that's interesting here. But then we'll have to watch for like high school football. I know Bradford down at Dunellen tomorrow right now. This is showing at 7. Areas here around Gainesville, okay. But then as we get down here toward Dunellen, they're also okay at that point in time. But then maybe some action, around it. It's just not going to be 100% accurate. Obviously, getting this, far out, even current on the high-res models is not going to pick up exactly right. But then as we get here into Ward, that Saturday morning, you can see some stuff coming toward Tallahassee, which I know folks in terms of the FSU game don't want to see. And this is the noon. Tailgating could get disrupted by some passing showers and storms here. And, it's lightning. That means, could dampen that. Then you see this is 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. As far as that'll go out, and you may have lightning even in that vicinity. You have to watch toward Gainesville for their game Saturday night as well. I believe they're playing Long Island there. I recall that game is one there that, I know they've had games like that before where you end up just, if there is a problem, they can just, it's not a high demand game. So, might just, if we had storms for hours, it would just probably get canceled versus Alabama game. They don't want to cancel that. I doubt they would, but it's not in conference. I guess that would be a possibility, but that's a very high ticket demand type of game, so that would probably be something where folks would be really disappointed and refunds that could be an issue. Have to, be issued there, but as we're depending on how the game went, how long it went, that, that's not a cheap ticket. But as we go ahead and look here at things, we'll go ahead and go back on over toward the temperature map here. A little cooler on Starke. I mean, we're getting right now more 78. You see the heavy rain coming down. Let me go back over. Let's tighten in on that mode of rotation tracker. Let's go ahead and look at that. Our camera doesn't face south on here, but obviously you see that looks a little bit more impressive now on that, but I think it was hidden off of that. And it's a little displaced here still from the precip. And with that continuing, I know that seems kind of, you may not understand what that means, but generally that means it's not really surface based, it's elevated. And then that it would be a little less likely to bruise, but we saw the one in Putnam, it kind of looked like that, and then it got together and it caused a big problem in terms of a good bit of damage from what I've heard with trees and the like. So, whether it was wind or tornado, if it was something here that, it could have come together surface based, and then that would have been an issue. So, there's no advisory on this as of now. So that makes me think they're really, they're watching, of course. And we had a situation where pretty quick from advisory to tornado warning for Flagler earlier on. And as this gets closer to Ward, areas further east and toward the Atlantic, eventually we'll have to monitor it. I mean, moving very slowly. We'll have to monitor things, obviously, here in toward the weather center. It's a tricky situation here for sure. I'm trying to be very careful. Our rotation tracker is almost going kind of, if you just looked at this, you would say I have to stay on the air with this because it's going kind of crazy with that signature now here on the southeast side of Starke. I had it around, obviously, but that's the tightest it's been on that, which is interesting here. Let me just go ahead. Again, it seems to be displaced from what I'm seeing. Well, let's check that here. 538, yeah, I mean, because those are 4 minutes off, and it says them together, meaning they're not together, but you have to be careful here still. Don't get me wrong. We have to be very careful with it. Melbourne radar not really showing it. I want to look how, if we have like angle contamination. That's why I'm going between these, even though they're way high up. A little weak on that rotation on the Tampa radar. You have the Moody radar, some weak rotation there. So that's the one, your secondary one. And Tallahassee radar showing some weak rotation here as well. So that's tighter on that. Let me see here. So we're going to go up a little bit higher up. I don't want to go away with this yet because, when you go higher and higher up here, some of those scans are showing something pretty interesting. So, you need to be vigilant here. We're not going to wrap it up yet then. We're going to keep it going, guys. Let's keep it going then. That looks like it's getting closer together now. That's 538. That's 538. So, and that's pretty tight. So this is going to move here. This is pretty rural areas, and they're talking about now. But this is as close as it's probably been to getting a tornado warning since we've been on. And that's really tightening up. This is just east of State Road 100 down there. In eastern, southeastern, east central, really southeast, I would say Bradford County. Because we're east central, and this is a good few miles away from us going south. Check for debris here. Again, that's pretty tight on that. Again, it's kind of on the edge, but it's close enough here where that's as concerning as it's looked here since we've been watching this storm. Again, this is very rural territory, east of 100 out there. And this will be ultimately getting in the clay. It could. There's the airport, Keystone Airport. It keeps trailing south like it does. So let's just kind of track this. Let's just assume it's going to follow this track, and it kind of gets more in there. Lake, am I looking at that right here? Let me check that lake here. So again, make sure I'm looking at the map right here. Bear with me as we're trying to just give you guys the very latest here on this. Okay, so we're looking around the rest of here, the airport, obviously. Trying to keep you up to date. So that'd be around Lowry Lake here. I was about to call it Lake Geneva, no, but Lowry Lake is where this could be headed towards. So that's not far from Goldhead Branch State Park as we're tracking things. So that's kind of where we're at right now with this. So let's go ahead and continue to track this here. In case they do issue a warning, this was north of town, now it's south of Starke. So if we get a warning, just so you know, that's where we'll be tracking this at. Let's go ahead and zoom back out a little bit. We have down there in toward Flagler County. It looks like not much, just heavy downpours there too. Zooming around here. Again, this is tight. It's now south. It was north when we jumped in, but we've been on for, let's see, how long have we been on? We've been on for about 20 minutes or so. No, maybe more closer to 30 minutes at this point as we're tracking things. So again, trying to give you guys the latest here. Again, trying to give you updates. So again, we're trying to make sure that this doesn't tighten. That looks a little weaker now. Again, that's Lowry Lake down here. Trying to give you guys the latest. We're still with you. A lot weaker on that spin now. But again, it's coming and going here. I know, our rotation trackers is hitting on this like crazy. I mean, it is literally showing rotation that's right on the edge of our scale. I mean, it shows rotation from like 1 to 20, and it's showing at 19, which generally would be a tornado warning situation, but it's a little displaced, but if it got together real quick, that'd be a problem, and you need a tornado warning, may would, you know, be in a spot where it's actually producing, so. Again, just continuing to give you guys the latest here. Again, no formal warning, not saying there needs to be one. That one scan beforehand kind of made me think otherwise, but it's becoming a little bit more broad again. Just check for any type of debris in here. Just gonna check some things. I know, gotta be watching out for those rip currents, you know, for the holiday weekend around as well. I mean, some of the weather won't be ideal, you know, at times, but like Sunday, Monday, Weather Service Jacks are just sending out there on Twitter/X that rip current risk does increase to high Sunday and Monday, Jacksonville and Southeast Georgia area beaches. Moderate risk before that. But, you know, some of the days, some of the times, the weather won't be as good. So, I know. It's still raining out there, but the sun's also out, okay? So that's interesting. This is probably going to look a little weird, but I'm going to pull it up here on our camera. Probably a little bright, but there you go. It's sunny and it's rainy at the same time here east of Starke. We had some of these reports earlier on with the tornado warning around Bunnell. I know somebody said it was sunny. They were also under tornado warning at the same time. This is some weird stuff in terms of the weather that we're tracking here. But there you go. The sun's out with the rain live on our camera now as we're looking just outside of our windows. So again, that's kind of telling an interesting story here about how isolated these storms are with the, you know, clouds and the like. So, again, that's a unique vantage point for sure. I know this happened a little bit last, you know, February there, 2024, with those hailstorms that we were looking at here around, and those discrete storms had tornado warnings, some as well. But again, odd situation. It's warmer today. I'm, you know, seeing here by a good margin than that day, though. That's not, you know, then it would be more of a hail situation today, not so much. So, but there was a report of a little bit in Flagler County, and we had some indications on Raider and Putnam. So we'll keep checking stuff here. We'll probably wrap it up pretty soon, unless something really jumps out at us again. I know it's been really up and down situation here. You know, it's kind of a tricky thing, but you know, earlier this afternoon we had that tornado warning there for Putnam County. In fact, I'm going to get a loop together of that. It'll take a second, but our system's going to load it on in here. It'll probably take like about 30 seconds because it's going back pretty far, but I want to just pull this up for everybody that wasn't with us earlier on. If you were working, maybe you didn't see that we had 2 tornado warnings earlier on. That's why we're being extra careful with this rotational area around Bradford County, just in case. And I'll just show you what we're talking about here. So let me just go back 3. Let me go ahead and take it back just a little bit more here on the timeline. So I'm going to load some more frames on in. As we watch, as we track here. Just an interesting situation for sure. want to be here for you, just be on top of it, because I know it's right, during local news time too. So, obviously it's something they could jump to real quick, and it's something we're right here at it. And, obviously it'd take at least a couple minutes to get on here. That's just how it works, to, get the stream going. Even if it's on standby, it'll still take at least a minute or two, if not more. So that's why I wanted to be on top of this. Okay, we have the loop ready yet now, I think. It wasn't ready yet a minute ago, but now it's ready. So let's go ahead and jump to that other mode. So you saw how I had the red box earlier on, and another red box. So it's pretty busy. I moved this over just a tad so you can watch that one. We haven't had any boxes red or yellow for the Bradford one that we've been watching, but we had the red box earlier on, another red box, and then we had a storm go across Bradford County with some rotation, but we haven't had that. So it's something I don't normally do on here, but I'm going to pull up rotation tracker, and it's raw, rotation, and obviously it doesn't indicate if something's more displaced like what we've seen in Bradford, but I'll pull this back in for a second. I'm going to do rotation tracker like this, which is something I very rarely do. It takes a good bit to load in our system, but you'll have to look kind of close at some of these areas here because the way I have it zoomed, but it's just to kind of give you perspective on why we were concerned for Bradford County here with this, even if it was displaced maybe. I mean, in some ways, it was showing up tighter than the other two here, but really, when you look at everything together, not so much. But again, I'm just continuing to give you guys the very latest here. Just seeing if all of our frames have loaded on our system. I believe they have. So let me go ahead. Okay, we're going to load it in now on the screen. So you see the little areas of yellow, red. If you look real carefully, see that across Bradford right there. But this is going back to the last few hours. You see these little areas? You have to look real close, but there's our rotation tracker product. Another thing I can do that probably even better, we'll just go to rotational path tracker. So the 1 hour rotation, we're going to see that a good bit better probably. So we'll loop that around and then so that product here in just a second as we're tracking things here in toward the weather center. So we're loading that on in right now, the shear rate path for 60 minutes, the loop of that. So again, just trying to give you guys the very latest here. Again, this is not something we were really anticipating today. No formal risk of severe weather, but sometimes things just happen with boundaries and meteorology, the frontal boundary, and instability, getting spin, and stuff discrete, allowing some supercellular development. So you see some of these paths here of the rotation, and you see stuff come around Bradford County, and that one that we were tracking there. But then the others, you see Flagler, and you see Putnam. And we had a lull for a good bit, a little bit of areas of spin, but we had the one come across Starke there with the spin. But again, you kind of see what we're talking about here if you look real carefully at other little areas too. But the two we had the warnings on were for Flagler and Putnam. As I've been monitoring things here in toward the weather center. So let's go to current. We'll go to rainfall. Overall, I mean, it's not been as rainy as in terms of the coverage of storms as some summer days. But we've had those tornado warnings, which obviously, are critical to track and, draw headlines as they said, as you see the sun out now here around Starke. So let's go to current rotation. There's still some right on the Bradford, Clay County line. You can see this north of the Keystone Airport. Still headed in the direction there of Lowry Lake. Just checking some more information here. Let's see, Top Cat watching. Thanks for watching there on YouTube as well as everybody else. Almost like a little inflow or something popping up there on this, but course, we covered in tornado warning storms in our area, 62 counties, but this didn't have a formal warning. We just probably been on, to be extra careful here. That's what we've been watching here. I know in other parts of the country there are some severe thunderstorm warnings today. Parts of northern Texas, northern Louisiana there is a formal risk of severe weather out that way. Here, it's just a general thunderstorm risk. But a lot of discrete acts. And let's look towards central Florida a little. Don't see anything too crazy in rotation tracker down there. But up here, just stand out a little more. Again, we're trying to give you the updates. I know I just didn't know this, but I believe the way we're pronouncing Lowry Lake is actually Laurie Lake is how we should be pronouncing that here. I'm just thinking, because that's not something we ever talk about on here, but I think I'm actually saying that wrong, Laurie Lake. So, again, just kind of giving you guys the latest here. That's why I haven't, heard about that name too much, because it would actually be, Laurie Lake. So, again, as we're looking at, we're tracking things here. So, again, trying to give you guys the very latest. It's headed toward that lake, though. That's right down in here. You see that hook? The rotation, though, not quite as tight as it's been at points. Definitely see some of that on the Moody radar, though. A lot, which is kind of concerning, man. And it's just, it's not just one little scan that shows it. And look, this is going higher up, by the way, on some of these tilts. We need to watch this in Clay County. Don't get me wrong, but we don't have a formal warning. I feel like we just, at this point, we kind of just need to let it go unless something tightens back, because really, we've been on for a real long time and not have a formal warning. I really don't, want to just stick with this for hours and hours if we're not going to quite meet warning criteria. But we were tracking across Bradford County. I mean, it's been across the county. We've been going for an hour probably across the county. We've been on with a little less than that. But, I mean, this has been something we've been monitoring here carefully in the Weather Center. So, I'm going to keep watching it. Still remain vigilant. If you hear something over there like freight train noise, be ready to take those tornado precautions. But we're right now, we're just going to go ahead and try to wrap it, I think, for the time being, assuming we won't get something on us, popping up in the next few seconds. So, just going to do it for now. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll jump back in, if it's warranted, but around Laurie Lake there is where we're tracking that area of rotation. We're just going to continue to give you guys the very latest here on this, and be back here if it is warranted. So otherwise, I'll be back one more update late tonight. Stay tuned, everybody. Stay safe. Whenever thunder roars, you want to go indoors, that's for sure. And we're just going to continue to monitor the weather situation here as we look at things and as we track things. So just stay safe. We'll get a warning here. We'll be back with you, especially if it's a tornado warning. So we're watching for Bradford County. We're tracking things. We're giving you guys the latest. It's all about protecting you, your friends, and your family. It's sunny here now where we're at. It's an odd pattern for sure. Had 4/10 of an inch of rain pretty quick right before, that, and even the sun was out before it stopped. But, 4/10 of an inch, a good bit. But the sun's out right now, and we're just gonna, we're gonna be watching these storms though, and we'll be back on if it's warranted. Stay safe.